Hello everybody and welcome back to another photo mishmash. I'm Christina.
And I'm Toby.
And this is episode 28.
Mirrorless Roundup. Alright, so folks just saw a new and shortened intro. None of that wasting your time jazz. We're just going to dive right into it.
Okay.
So what's up first?
So up first is the weekend review. You had some great videos out this week. The GH4 is the first one.
Do you think my videos were great this week?
They were excellent.
Did you watch them?
From beginning to end.
Liar. GH4.
Yep.
Rented that again from our friends, the fine folks at Lumoid. I wanted to do some more careful testing, especially versus the 70D, and to take a look at that. I also wanted an excuse to have it back because it's a nice camera. It's fun to use. The fun factor in using it, the experience of using it is very high, very positive feeling. And so that went out, and generally, that 70D dual pixel still is very good, very easy auto-focusing during video, but that sharpness of the GH4, it's sharp. You notice some significant differences there. Yep.
That's right.
And that's also, watch that if you haven't, if you're curious about it. Our discussion piece today is going to be kind of a wrap-up of our thoughts. Not a wrap-up because it's always going to be new cameras coming in and changing, but our thoughts on the kind of current offerings of mirrorless cameras and maybe how those are positioned against DSLRs to some degree too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So another video that went out this week was our diptych critique.
Who are you calling a diptych? I'm going to say that every time.
That's like the 20th time you've said that joke.
What's a diptych again?
Why don't you explain it?
Okay. A diptych is when you put two photographs together into one composition or piece of art and always, or they should always, complement each other to work in such a way that as a unit, they make a stronger image, stronger piece of art. And so folks submitted those for their assignment. I think that was assignment number 4. Assignment number 5 will be announced soon. It was reader submitted, so I'm excited about that.
Great.
And I thought we had some really good ones, and we had some great comments. But if you haven't watched that, go take a few moments to skip around and look through some of those different options. I think it really adds a neat element when you're going out and photographing and thinking about not just taking one picture, but taking a couple of pictures that are going to work together to tell. A story might be too strong a word, but to tell.
Or just getting into the mindset that there is not just one way to photograph things. There are multiple angles and multiple ways to approach a scene and a subject. And so that was kind of our goal, to get you guys to think that way.
Yeah. And our next assignment is not a triptych, but at some point, I think it would be fun to do that. That's 3 images together.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see. Did you know that the Olympus OMD EM1 and EM10, they actually have a little collage maker on the dial?
I did see you make some, yes.
Yes, that's fun. I can't believe it's its own little dial option, but it's there. It's fun.
Great. And lastly, you put out a second Think Before You Click video about leading lines. Finally. That took a really long time.
Not for any good reasons. It just got sitting there on that hard drive. So another Think Before You Click. These are super short. I try to keep them under 2 minutes. Things for you to think about as you bring the camera up to your eye and are starting to frame your composition. Now, they're not always going to just be about composition, but these first ones we talked about, what was the very first one?
Distracting elements?
Distracting elements. How to deal, a suggestion for how to deal with distracting elements. This was how to use lines in your composition to lead the viewer's eye where you want to go. Now remember our interview with David McKay? He used a term that I've started to use. I really like it.
What was that?
Walk your viewer through your image.
Oh yes, that's a great term.
And leading lines is a really simple way to do that. Those lines walk your viewer walk your viewer's eye to your subject. And so and next week, kind of transitioning a little bit into the week ahead, I will have another one out, and it's going to be talking about framing. So using natural framing, using elements within your composition to frame and draw your viewer's eye to the subject. Ready to help me film that?
All right, yeah.
Okay, good.
Totally. Great, so let's move on to news, and we don't have a ton to talk about with regards to news, but...
Oh, we do, you know, all those open tabs. I didn't write them down, but we're going to go through those tabs up there.
I can't tell if he's joking or if he's serious.
I'm not joking, I'm serious.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious.
Okay.
So, first let's start, you can start looking through those, and I will say there's been a follow-up to the monkey copyright claim. For those who watched last week, you know we talked a little bit about this photographer. He traveled out into the jungle. There were these macaws, is that what kind of monkeys they were? And the story is that a group of them stole his camera or borrowed it for a little bit of time, took a bunch of pictures, and one turned out and looked like this. He told people it's a monkey selfie. We titled last week's podcast Monkey Selfie. It's actually a lot of people have been titling their articles Monkey Selfie. And I asked you all, Wikimedia, Wiki Commons came up and said, hey, this image is free to use by anybody because that photographer didn't take it, a monkey took it, and monkeys can't have copyright. But he said, no, hold on. You know, that picture wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone out there into the jungle with all of the gear, set it up. I should have copyright.
So what did the U.S. Copyright Office decide?
U.S. Copyright Office said, buddy, we do not, the office will not register works produced by nature, animals, or plants. I really like the thought of a vine, like twirling around and pressing the shutter button. Likewise, the office cannot register a work purportedly created by divine or supernatural beings. So if you were hoping to get a picture of you taken by your haunted house ghost, sorry.
Not gonna happen.
Well, it could happen. You just can't copyright it for yourself. Although the office may register a work where the application of the deposit states that the work was inspired by a divine spirit. Okay. So examples, photograph taken by a monkey. That's a pretty good example. It seems pretty applicable to this. A mural painted by an elephant. A claim based on the appearance of actual animal skin, a claim based on a driftwood that has been shaped and smoothed by the ocean, a claim based on cut marks, defects, and other qualities found in natural stone.
I wonder how specific these examples are.
Yeah, pretty specific.
Yeah.
One other thing in doing more reading, his story has changed some, and Janine. So a lot of you said, they should have the copyright. That's what a lot of you said in the quote, or in the comments last week. Janine said, I don't think he actually... This picture's too good for it to be a monkey selfie. And I was like, oh, I believe him, Janine, you know, think that whole Shakespeare, 100 monkeys can eventually write Shakespeare, you know. But I think you might have been right, Janine, because now I'm starting to hear that he said, well, I set the camera up. Originally, the story was they took it, just completely ran around with it, took a bunch of blurry pictures and then took one. Now, it sounds like he had it set on a tripod, framed and focused carefully, and had a remote release that was triggered by the monkey, but a lot of the work had been done already. So not quite as accidental as it seems.
Which I think is good for him, because then, and if that's the case, then he gets to actually claim copyright over the image, so.
Yeah, but now he's starting to look kind of like a baboon. No? I don't know. So, and then, you know, the discussion in the comments, some was, well, you know, is the PR he's getting outweigh not being able to copyright this image? I don't know.
I don't think PR really ever helped. Well, that's not true. That's really not true. But I don't think so. I mean, you know, your work gets published somewhere, and just, I mean, he didn't even take this photo according to the story. So then
Right.
Why would anybody have any encouragement to go hire him or to, so I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway.
I thought it was interesting. Moving on, and he's still taking this to court, but this is the U.S. copyright that has ruled in this way. Now, we're going to skip over that Instagram thing and skip over that for a second, and that, and... Well, this bit of news here. The Style Me Pretty.
Let's skip that.
You know, well, I think it is nice PR. A little bit. It leads in, and that's to talk about your styled shoot that you did way back in February. Was that February?
Yep.
Was picked up by Style Me Pretty. And I think we have a fair number of viewers who may not have watched when we discussed that. So if you could, in a sentence or two, say what the styled shoot was, why you did it.
Well, the styled shoot was, the goal is to provide inspiration to brides for planning their wedding. And for us as vendors, it's an opportunity to get together and create content and show our work. And
show your work where you're in charge, right?
Right, yeah, and collaborate. So that's really what it was. The overall goal is to be able to get it published somewhere and maybe get some referrals and leads from that. So.
Yep, and it was published in Style Me Pretty, which is a national wedding blog.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's exciting. Yeah, that's exciting. So moving on to other news that doesn't have to do with us. One of the reasons we're going to go through several of these tabs is because there was a comment last week, very true. We talked about Photokina, and we really just talked about Canon and a little bit of Nikon. But there's a lot of other camera manufacturers going on there. We'll be talking about some of them here with these guys as well. But so I just wanted to run through some of the other kind of rumors and roundups of gear that we're going to hear about or see in the next couple of weeks.
Great. Looks like Hasselblad is announcing a new camera.
How many megapixels?
200.
200. Now here's
Hefty.
Yeah, it's hefty. Do you know what the file size is?
Let me guess. Like 2 gigabytes?
Oh no, 600 megabytes. Oh. Psh, hardly anything. So here's how it does it. It's not a 200 megapixel sensor. It is a 50-ish megapixel sensor. And it does pixel shifting and takes a series of images and then stitches them, collages them together to create one massive one.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds like it would be really buggy for some reason.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
It seems like just so much processing.
It is a lot of processing.
I mean, you click and it does all that in seconds.
Yep.
Fractions of a second.
Right.
Supposedly.
Well, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question of how quickly it's going to take, because you don't have to. You can also just take a 50 megapixel normal image. Right. You don't have to do the higher resolution stitched shots, because you can do a 1, 4, and 6 shot capabilities, and it's producing TIFF files.
Great. So that.
So I wonder. But I wonder how long, what that capture time is for those. When it has to stitch, because it can't be completely insignificant. It does have to be, if it's going to take 6 shots. Obviously, not something an Olympic sports photographer is going to be using. This is, I mean, a camera like this is going to get used primarily for what?
For commercial work. I mean, and I wasn't making that argument. I was just remarking on the fact that that is a lot of processing for every photo. I mean, I don't really have any experience with medium format digital cameras, so maybe they're already doing that. The whole concept is new to me. This is the first time I've heard of it, but that's just because I'm not really involved in that world so much. So,
I don't know what the cost is, but you know, what's the typical cost of some of those other medium format digital?
They range really, really widely, from like 13,000 to 50, 60,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. And so commercial work, stuff that is made into billboards the size of, you know, huge, very, very large. Yes.
So Pentax has.
Would you like that camera? That's what I want to know.
Pentax KS1. So tell me about this camera. It looks.
Well, it caught my eye. Well, you know, it's really interesting. I think I have a fairly good sample size in the number of messages and questions that I get each week. And occasionally I get questions about, you know, I'm interested in the T6i or the D5300, but what about this Pentax? And I have to say I haven't heard that question or gotten that question in the last couple of months. You know, it's a little sad. Here's the thing. First off, this caught my eye because the design is fairly futuristic. Again, we got audio-only listeners, and so, you know, it's got the DSLR form factor and shape, but it's got a lot of green glowing accents to it in the grip and in the shutter button. And I thought, hey, you know what? I feel like cameras have looked the same for quite a long time. Now, Lytro has come along and tried to give us that rectangle toilet paper tube.
But is this like just, well, I don't know.
Is it just show?
Yeah, it just seems really lazy. It's like, what can we do to make it look different? Oh, let's add a bunch of lights on the side.
Caught my eye. I think maybe it's marketed to men.
Okay.
If they were pink lights, would it be better?
Yes, I would be all over that camera if they were pink lights. If you
sarcasm?
didn't catch my sarcasm,
so,
let me just tell you.
Pentax has been right up there at the top of the entry-level DSLR market with their sensor quality. And they have a huge lens selection of older lenses and newer stuff. And many of them have been weatherproofed. Basically, at the price point the Pentax are sitting, they offer a lot to love. But beyond just the lenses, you have a very small ecosystem. And I think that's really huge. You know, when you go for help or you want to know this or that, if you ever want to get specific about your camera, you're going to find very few other people that are going to be out there and be helpful. And that's not the end of the world.
So here's a question that I, just thought about. If you are in the market, if you've never bought a DSLR and you're in the market for a DSLR, why would you choose a Pentax over like a Canon or a Nikon or a Sony? Why would you go for that? Is it price? It would be hard to believe that they have many, many more appealing features that Canon, Nikon, or Sony do not offer. If there are, enlighten me because I don't know them.
Well, the quality of the sensor, the feature set inside, and many of their, and I'm not sure if this one is going to be or not.
What does feature set mean? Be specific.
Well, like the Canon T6i sitting over there on the table. Takes nice pictures, but it doesn't have a panorama mode, or it doesn't have a very robust HDR mode, or focus bracketing.
And so this one does?
And Pentax offers. I don't know if this model specifically here is going to, but some of their other models do. The big bits are though weather resistant and a really nice sensor, a sensor that is definitely noticeably better than Canon at the same price point in the same kind of body size.
And so they're just not as popular because the lens selection is a lot more limited?
Well, no, it isn't, because it's got access to tons of older lenses. But see, that's when it starts to get confusing to people because they don't necessarily realize that they can always go to these older lenses. And so kind of the current lens selection can feel limited. And I think just a general kind of confusion in the fact that none of their friends ever talk about Pentax. You know,
sure.
when you go to work and you say, "Hey, Bob," your friend Bob, "I'm thinking about buying a DSLR," and Bob's like, "Go and get that Canon or that Nikon." I mean,
right.
that's what people talk about and what people know, and then some other people start to research and they say, "Oh, there's this."
But it seems like they're still hanging in there. Like, they haven't.
They are hanging in there.
Or maybe they're doing really well, but my perception is that they're just hanging in there.
And then we also have. We have our perception of here in America what we know is selling well, what we see when we walk down the street, or when we go to some place touristy and popular.
That's true, yeah. They could be
so
selling well
they
elsewhere.
are doing well outside of the country, or better, I should say, but whatever. Moving on. So I thought it was cool because it looked fancy. It caught my eye. Pentax is decent, but...
So the way to your heart is through...
If only you had
bright
some
lights.
LEDs on you. Only. Rokinon. We haven't talked about Rokinon much, but when we do, we also need to say Samyang and Bauer. All three companies basically have the same manufacturing, are producing the same lenses, and then stamp their own names on them. Rokinon's going to come out with a 50 f1.2.
Well, they have an 8414, is it?
85.
8514.
8514. Yep.
So I don't have a lot of experience with it. Our friend Bryant has one, and he uses it occasionally on weddings, or at weddings he has in the past. I mean, quality is good. It's definitely not, you know, Canon L lens quality, but the price.
It's pretty close to it. And what's the price?
Is it pretty close to it?
It's very good.
It's very good quality,
it's
yes.
It's a 1.4
but
too.
No autofocus.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the big guy. All of theirs lenses are manual focus only, and so they're quite popular with
video, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Video.
So they're coming out with a 51.2. Great.
51.2. So we probably won't be very interested in it because without autofocus, it's just not a lot of fun to use unless we're doing video. But some videos, yep. And that's a nice focal length on full frame. On crop, it's starting to get a little long. This bit is at Photokina. We might hear about a refresh of the EM1, which I haven't talked about at all, but I have a review coming up in the next week or so. And that refresh might include 4K shooting. Right now it only does 1080. We'll talk more about this camera in our discussion piece in just a few minutes. But I bet it's not gonna have 4K. I bet that's just wishful thinking on the parts of people and somebody trying to scare Panasonic a little bit.
Sigma is coming out with, or rumored to be releasing, a 24mm 1.4 art series lens and a 14-24 f4 with image stabilization. Yep. So here's my question about ultra-wide lenses, ultra-wide zoom lenses like this that come with image stabilization. Mm-hmm. Is the image stabilization built in to compensate for the fact that it can't open any wider than f4? And if so, is it not possible to create a lens that is that wide that has a maximum aperture any wider than or any larger than f4?
What about 16-35 f2.8?
Yeah, that's 2.8.
Yeah.
So then is the OS technology cheaper than creating that's my question.
I don't know. That's a great question. You know, I don't know. I suspect that it probably is, that putting image stabilization in is easier than creating glass and mechanisms for a very fast, very wide angle lens that is a zoom. It's probably, you know, fairly easy in a prime with less moving parts, but beyond that, it gets difficult. They also, I think, you know, balancing manufacturing costs and target marketing, videographers, talking to Bryant the other day, that's another piece. I have so much content that I need to edit and get out to you all. It's exciting, but a little daunting. Had a great conversation with our friend Bryant, who is a real videographer, someone who does this for a living. And, you know, he doesn't too often shoot wider than f2. And for a lot of handheld stuff, I would say you don't shoot wider than f4 for video. Because your focus, you know, area is small and you don't want to accidentally be moving in and out of that. So f4 in optical stabilization is really nice for some kind of run and gun handheld video shooting. So, but let's step back and say really quickly the 24 f1.4 art series. Interested?
No, I just don't shoot at that focal length long enough, and when I do, it's really limited, so I would just borrow your 24-70.
Now, on a crop sensor, that 24 is going to be what, 40-ish?
Yeah, I would consider that on a crop sensor.
That's a nice focal length, and so we're talking about their art series lenses. We have the 50 and the 35, lovely, lovely lenses for the money. So it's nice to see another option coming out.
Yeah.
I know what a lot of people are waiting for, and rumored that maybe later this year, an 85-1.4 that's in their art series.
But I don't think that there's been any current rumors about that.
No, but it'll be really interesting to put that up side by side with the 85 f1.2, which we love.
Absolutely.
Love.
Great. So Nikon has released, well, there's a rumored image of the D50. D750.
D750. Yep. So we mentioned this last week, so I just wanted to say it again. I'll throw up we got a picture of the back. I am coming soon. This is a full frame sports-oriented camera is what the rumor is. So that's interesting. We'll see how that works. And 24 megapixels, which is the same as their crop sensors in the 7100 and 5300. We seem to be sitting at that 24 megapixel spot with a lot of different things. Some of, not these guys, but some of the mirrorless are sitting there. A lot of the DSLRs are sitting there.
It's interesting to me that they are, these camera manufacturers are choosing to produce niche market cameras as opposed to just releasing newer models that'll apply to a wide variety of photographers. I wonder why that is. Yeah, it's just interesting to me.
Yep.
Why release a camera that's tailored specifically for sports photographers and not just one that, you know, would work just as well for sports photographers and wedding photographers and maybe landscape photographers?
Well, I mean, you could make the argument that this could be a wonderful wedding camera. Full frame, so good in low light, fast burst rate, so you're not going to miss the kiss. You're going to get every moment from when their lips touch.
Sports photographers, or camera for sports photography, seems a little overkill for weddings in the way that I shoot anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that, you know, they're not trying to, or they're trying to either diversify or just...
Well, you know what I have heard, and I think is true, is that for almost all of these companies, the bodies are a means to sell lenses.
Okay.
The lenses is where the companies make the money. And so if they get a camera out there in the market that spurs high-end zoom full-frame lenses for Nikon like this, then they're like, that's what we want. So we'll see. Also wildlife. If it's good for sports, it's going to be good for wildlife with shooting that burst rate.
Yeah.
So
another rumor is from Canon. It's the 11 by 24 f2.8L lens to be announced, starting at $2,800.
Yep. So here is proof that we can have, and we knew already, but very wide, possible f2.8 lens. At very expensive, $2,800 is the rumored price. So I don't spend a whole lot of time talking about this rumor, but that is wide.
That's really wide. And I wonder how much the Sigma will be compared to this.
That's a great question.
And this does not seem to have, or based on the rumor, image stabilization. So
no.
They're
Not
definitely going for, the aperture.
Yep.
Well.
Yep.
Okay, and lastly, I think, lastly.
Shoo!
Canon 7D Mark II, 750D T6i, SL2, and EOS-M 3 to be announced Q3 of 2014. So.
Question mark.
Photokina, no Photokina?
Photokina.
Yeah.
And this is just, you know, I was scraping the bottom of the barrel for some of these rumors to kind of just spread it across all this. Don't nod your head. But SL2, I mean, it really is time. These smaller entry-level cameras get refreshed about every year. And so the T5i has been out now for over a year. SL1 has been out for over a year. And what's the other one? Oh, the 150D. Oh, that is the SL1. What else? Oh, the
SL2.
EOS-M 3. So, and that's another thing that discussion, there was some good comments on the previous videos about, come on, Canon, make us a good mirrorless camera. Two things. One, these mirrorless cameras still aren't selling that well. So I think Canon's like, well, I don't know. And two, they're really scared of cannibalizing their own sales.
Did you already stop and start that? Oh, great.
So, you know, it would be, I love these guys. When we were walking around Williamsburg, it was so nice to travel light and say, you know what, I'm not going to miss any shots, you know, walking around, taking pictures of the kids, you know, in the stockades, or taking pictures of us in the stockades, or just kind of touristy shots. This is going to be absolutely as good as my 5D Mark III.
That being said, though, you still carry like a pretty significant bag that you carry this in. So, I mean, it's sort of unrelated. I get what your point is about that, but does it really make that big a difference? Like if you had the 5D Mark II with a zoom lens, or 5D Mark III with a zoom lens?
You must not have to. I must carry your stuff all the time for you. I'm going to stop carrying your stuff for you.
What do you mean? Would it really make such a noticeable difference? I mean, your bag is about this big when you carry that green bag, and then the other smaller one would still fit the 5D Mark III with a zoom lens on
we're
it.
talking fitting and weight. I mean, the 5D Mark III with a 24-70, that is a significant weight. That's 4-some pounds?
As opposed to?
A pound. Pound and a half.
Okay.
It's a pretty significant difference. So, to come back to what I was saying, it would be really nice for Canon to come out with something that I can throw my EF lenses on, like an EOS-M that is capable. Now, I'm sorry to those people who already own the EOS-M, and they say it is plenty capable. I hear good things about it, but it's not quite to the level of yet where I'd be excited to buy it for me.
And again, going back to your argument about weight, if you had a Canon mirrorless, the lenses would still weigh the same. So you're now talking about going from 4 to 1 pounds, from like 4 to like 2.5, maybe 3 pounds.
Right.
So.
Right. But you could throw the 40 pancake prime in there.
That's true.
So, yeah. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into our mirrorless discussion. Are we there?
I think we're there.
Okay.
So, our discussion for today.
Yeah.
DSLR or mirrorless? Which should be your next camera? Go.
Well, that's not actually... I think I pasted that in from the Verge article as title to say. There was that Verge article this week that I shared out. It asked people. And it was kind of neat because it gave them a little quiz. Said, do you care about how much weight you carry around? Do you care about how much you spend on your next camera? And it kind of guided them to, well, you should consider a mirrorless or a DSLR. You know, I have often thought of kind of coming up with my own little questionnaire. That was actually one of the first ideas I had for this whole thing that I do that led people to the right question. Shh, there's no other ones out there like that.
They're not personalized though.
Right, and that's where I came up with it. It's too granular a lot of times. But it still is good and it guided you in the right direction. But what we wanted to have is a discussion, and we're actually probably going to break this out and put it at its own video as well, if it goes well enough. So, and as, well. So let's start that again so we can break it out. So we're going to break this out into its own discussion. A kind of a wrap up of the mirrorless cameras we've had our hands on this summer.
Should you fix your mic? Technical difficulties.
Okay. And let's run down the list of what we've had our hands on. The GH4, the Olympus EM1 and EM10,
The XT1,
the Fuji XT1,
the Sony a6000,
Sony a6000, and the Sony a7. Now, I haven't done any formal testing with the a7S or R, but I can extrapolate and we can talk about them. I think that's it. So,
great. So, Desert Island, if you had to pick anyone, which one would it be?
The GH4.
Okay.
What would you pick? No. I mentioned this at the beginning of this podcast. It was the most enjoyable experience to shoot with. It felt really nice in the
Video
hand.
and photo or just video?
Video and photo, but especially video. And I could amuse myself, you know, juggling coconuts and then watching it in 4K. Or watching it in 1080p in slow motion.
Okay.
Do I have a charger on the desert island?
Yes, because you would have to.
Okay. Whew, good.
And there's a
otherwise,
single outlet.
All of these cameras would be fun for about half a day. And that's a drawback, all of them, except for the GH4, is battery life. You sacrifice battery life over these DSLRs.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the GH4, I would pick, out of the ones we've talked about, what would you pick?
The GH4.
GH4. Why would you pick?
Well, I think it was just really fun for me to be able to, and I guess I should say full disclosure, you know, I haven't played with all of these cameras for the exact amount of time, but I have, in testing, used them somewhat. So, you know, I haven't played with any of the Olympus as much as I did with the GH4, and honestly, it's not because I just decided that, or I did just decide that I wanted to use the GH4, because there was one point where I touched it, or I grabbed it to take video, and the experience was so enjoyable and so intuitive for me that I just wanted to keep on using it. I think that I would really enjoy taking video more if I had the GH4. If I was just a hobbyist and I could pick just one camera that would do photo and video well, and I didn't have to shoot weddings and could only shoot family portraits, based on the lens selection, based on the video controls, based on the image quality, on the electronic viewfinder, it would be the GH4.
GH4, that's very
so
nice.
I do think that the fact that I wanted to come back to this camera above even the XT1, which we had for a little while, and I didn't really have, I mean, I picked it up, it's pretty, but...
The XT1. Well, let's talk about the XT1 a little bit.
Okay.
It is pretty. Is that a reason why people should buy cameras?
I don't think so.
For some people, it might be a reason.
If you had some extra money laying around. That's not to say that the camera is not a great camera, though.
That's very true.
So,
it's a very good camera. Now,
for me, as you know, as a photographer, I really appreciate the handling of the camera, the controls. I appreciate that it's small. It is good looking, so I mean, I do care about style, so that is a factor that I'm going to consider, that I would consider, but it wouldn't be the deciding factor by any means. So I do like the controls and how analog it feels to use. I like that everything's right there, and while it might take you a little bit of a long time to sort of get used to everything, once you figured it out, you're done. So I do appreciate that about it. The electronic viewfinder was also really, really nice.
The electronic viewfinder is quite amazing. The image quality is excellent because it is a slightly bigger sensor. It's an APS-C size sensor, whereas the GH4 and these guys have the micro Four Thirds sensor.
Here's what's interesting, though. In talking about these cameras, it has become so much less, you know, the discussion is so much less about the image quality, I think, than about all the nuances that make the camera so different. And I don't know if that's because we use cameras on almost a daily basis and we have a different perspective. So I do wonder, I mean, if you were to lay photos side by side from all of these cameras, you would be able to tell differences, but are they significant differences? Probably not, right?
No.
So
not unless you're getting into some kind of specific shooting, like you need high action or you need really good performance in low light.
Right.
Your general walk around quality, I don't think you're even going to be able to tell the difference between any of these. If we
I agree.
put down and then mixed them around and said which one is which, no. And yeah, I agree. I think we don't talk a lot, and I don't go in super detail about you know, image scores and ISO scores and reference DxO mark very often, because when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, a normal person using these, you're going to get the same quality.
Yeah.
So
I think so too.
But there are differences to be aware of if you have specific needs. Right. So you know, I liked the Fuji X-T1, but I didn't love it. It felt kind of slow to me to use. And I think I used it long enough to say I'm comfortable with it, but this is just very physical manual dials that I felt like I needed to put my eyeballs on to turn and then shoot. The viewfinder's gorgeous, and the image quality is very happy with. Nice feature set.
Yeah. In contrast, you know, using these Olympus cameras, as I was trying to do some tests of the focus tracking as you know, walked back and forth, I couldn't figure out how to reset.
You were a little frustrated.
I was very frustrated. I couldn't figure out easily how to reset the focus point, how to move the focus point, how to change the ISO on the smaller one. I couldn't figure out how to do that. There was like no easy way to do it, in fact, unless you set custom functions to some of the buttons. So for me, I think it's really important to feel really comfortable right off the bat using a camera. So I think one of the downsides from these Olympus cameras is that they just have crammed way too many dials on, too many buttons.
Well, and I think it's something that many of these cameras have done. And, you know, to be fair for the GH4, it's DSLR sized. And so it hasn't shrunk itself down very much. And well, these guys have. And yes, they are trying to give you a boatload of buttons in a small form factor, and it may be to a detriment.
The GH4 isn't that much bigger than this camera that you're holding right now.
No, it's not. But
it's comparable.
It's comparable, but it has a little bit more of that DSLR shape, so it gives it a little bit more room.
But in terms of weight, which is what we've been discussing earlier,
weight-wise,
it's not that big a difference.
No, it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about these guys a little bit now, because I think they, well, the Olympus, their big strength is in body stabilization. They offer that, so any lens you throw on, and they have good lens selection because it's the standard micro four thirds mount. That's the thing about the Fuji. They have a good lens selection, but it's certainly not huge because it is a fairly new mount, and it's X mount, and they're still producing lenses for it.
Okay, question for you about these cameras. Is it always on, the in-body stabilization, or do you have to manually turn it on and off?
You can choose whether or not it's on, and it works the same as our lens IS and our lenses. When you pick the camera up and half press the button, if it wasn't already running, it starts running. And you can actually hear it a bunch in this little guy. It's quite audible. It doesn't seem to be picked up in videos, but you can only hear it in this one if you try, because it's slightly bigger. This guy's real issue, though, is it is starting to get hefty. And it's pricey, $1,400. But inside it is packed full of serious features, flash control, really nice bracketing. It's also got peaking and magnification. I actually really did enjoy using this a lot. Once you take the time to say, I'm gonna make this button do X and that button do Y, I like that. And it feels like a faster experience to me than using the Fuji X-T1. Viewfinder is good, not quite as good as the Fuji X-T1, but certainly not as bad as the A6000.
And so, going back to, remind me what mount this camera has?
This is the standard micro four thirds mount.
Okay, and the GH4 has
that's standard micro four thirds too. Yep.
So in terms of lens selection, they're about the same, you would say? Okay.
Oh yes, absolutely. They can share lenses.
Yeah.
We could put this.
But the GH4 is a lot cheaper, and it still offers the same quality, so you would still go back to that.
Oh, the GH4 is not. It's actually body only is a little bit more than this. GH4 body only is $1,600.
Okay.
This is $1,400.
All right.
So I mean, the GH4, it's 4K video that in this little package. That's its big headline feature.
For $200 more.
For $200 more. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're supposed to see that refresh of maybe that's shooting 4K, but the video quality out of this is okay. It's neat that it's got the stabilization.
Okay. So we've talked about the Olympus.
Yep.
And we've talked about the GH4.
Yep.
And the X-T1.
And the Fuji. And we just mentioned
the A6000.
A6000.
So talk about that.
That is the camera that I'm recommending to most people right now who come to me and say, I want DSLR quality, but I'm a little worried about carrying around a DSLR, because this is why I'm recommending it. It has an APS-C size sensor in there. It has focusing speed that is on par with a DSLR. I was blown away by its focusing speed. Still none of these cameras, and the focusing speed in these guys was good too. And the Fuji is very good as well. Still, none of them are as good as tracking as a good DSLR is. We ran those tests yesterday, the 70D, doing servo mode, tracking a subject coming towards you, much more frames in focus than any of these other ones. And the Sony A6000 actually can machine gun fire. I think it's 11 frames a second, but they're not all in focus.
Right.
But overall, focus is still very good in that camera. And it is light. It is as small and light as this little EM10 here. It's $600-700. It does give you an EVF, even though if we don't love it, because it was just kind of a flat, blah look.
And you can add on a mount adapter to use Canon and other lenses.
Yes, you can.
If you wanted to.
And that's true the same with the A7 we'll talk about in a second. But your focus gets buggy.
Yes,
but
they're pretty buggy.
The reason you want to think about adding a mount on is lens selection in general is not great there as well.
Right. So that would affect a lot of its functionality. That would, you know, change our opinions about a lot of its functionality, because we don't have such a large lens selection, and we could potentially have it if we added a mount on there, but then it wouldn't have all the same features because it would be quite buggy. So,
yeah. Right.
But
you know, for somebody who is just thinking about DSLR because they want better pictures of their kids, they're not going to get into professional photography, it is an excellent price point, excellent quality, very good feature set. So.
Great. And you would still pick the GH4 over this one?
For me, because I love that video.
Okay.
But for all around, the A6000.
The A6000.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. And then we got one more, another Sony, the A7 series.
And actually going back to the A6000, hadn't we discussed that the viewfinder, that the reason that it was, or not the reason, but because it was so desaturated and what's the word that I'm looking for here? Just really bland looking.
Yeah.
That was kind of a good thing for us.
We joked about that a little bit, because you look through an optical viewfinder at like the setting sun and this golden, beautiful view, and you take a picture, especially if you're shooting raw.
No, at an actual viewfinder, right? Optical.
Yeah. You take a picture if you're shooting raw, and then you know what you get afterwards. It's kind of like, that's not what I experienced there. And of course, you need a little post-processing to punch it up and make it look nice. Whereas, yeah, we said looking through the Sony A6000 viewfinder is much more like what you're going to get. But, you know, one of the things that I hear people say, and I feel the same way, is electronic viewfinders oftentimes kind of divorce you from the scene a little bit, because you're looking at a screen, you're not actually looking out the window. And their resolution is on the lower side, many of them. So having a really poor one does make me love the camera less.
Okay.
So having a nice one, and also it was a little laggy too. This one's very nice. This one's okay. GH4 was fine. Fuji X-T1 is amazing. Not only because it's like looking into a room. I've said this before. If you've watched all my videos, I'm sorry, you start to hear me repeat a lot of the same thing. It's like looking into a room with a giant screen on the far wall that was your view, and then you had your small little thumbnail split screen view. It was great.
Great. So you were going to talk about the A7.
The A7, to wrap up. That is the standout feature, or the standout feature of that camera is it's got a full frame sensor in there. And that, a really nice full frame sensor.
And what's the pricing for this camera?
Pricing starts about $1,700 for just the A7 and goes way up if you want the A7S. But that is a camera that's literally capable of shooting in the dark. High quality video, only a 12 megapixel sensor though. And then there's the A7R, 36 megapixel sensor, very good quality, but all three of these cameras basically the same kind of form factor. Very light, smallish, you know, not a whole lot different in size than this guy, but they have a really small lens selection for those folks to match with their cameras. And of course you can do adapters again, but you're gonna be even slower. Landscape shooters who wanna hike out into the wilderness, travel really light, one of the Sony A7 or A7R is a very viable option. Video folks who are often shooting in low light, the A7S. You verse that versus the GH4, it certainly does better in low light, significantly better. But you can't shoot 4K unless you have all the extra clunk thing into it.
Sure. Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
So, did we sum up anything? A6000 for general casual shooters.
That is the best choice for anybody who's looking for DSLR quality without the price necessarily and without the added weight.
Yep. If you want packed features, good quality, stabilization, the EM1 is something to consider, or buy the older EM5, which used sells very well. Low light, A7S.
Video.
Video.
And photo.
And photo.
But a lot of video.
Video.
The GH4.
Yeah, GH4.
And
yeah,
that's pretty much it.
That
XT1 is kind of that's kind of the accessory camera, I think.
Oh, but it does, I mean, that's a disservice to it, yes.
Well, yes, you're right. It does shoot beautiful pictures, but I feel like, you know, what's the price, body only?
12? I don't know.
That's not that bad, actually.
No, it's not that bad. That's all wait while I look up the price. $12.99.
Okay. Body only, right?
Body only. Yeah, $12.99 body only.
Yeah.
So.
No, it is a really nice camera.
It is.
But yeah, the features, the controls are very manual feeling.
Yep.
So.
Weather resistant Fuji, EM1's weather resistant, GH4 not so much. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully that wraps it up.
Well, that wraps up our current thoughts. But, you know, as we said, there's going to be more releases soon. It's going to be really interesting to see where they go. There's also big discussion about long-term viability of some of these manufacturers. As I said, Canon's watching this market because it's not in the US, especially selling amazingly well. You certainly see forums and people talking about it, but when you look at actual numbers that are being sold, they still, you know, yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch how this all shakes out over the next couple of years.
Great. So, moving on to reader questions.
Reader questions. We're just going to finish up with those questions from the previous week that we didn't get to. We just have a couple because we've been talking for long enough. I don't believe we answered the shooting in the rain question last week. Some tips for shooting in the rain.
From who?
Angela. I might sneeze. While we're doing that, while you're pulling that up, I'd just like to remind people that we're on iTunes and we've had our first review. Thank you, Anthony from SF. You know, he said that we're funny and awkward.
I'll take it.
And
we're
hilarious.
Super awkward. Okay.
Full of great info in a chill style. They make learning photography not so overwhelming, and when it is, they're there to throw out their 2 cents to make it a little easier. They make a good team. Enjoy. Thank you so much, Anthony. And it would be awesome if you all are listening on iTunes to take a moment and leave a review and say, well, they're pretty good as long as they have their questions up and we don't have to sit and listen to silence while we wait for them to get their questions up.
So
right.
Tell me about this, tell me about the rain photography tips. I'm a little confused.
They want some rain photography tips from us.
Okay. But specifically, Angela Redmond.
Yep.
She is wondering why she can't seem
the rain to look like it's rain.
To get the rain to look like rain. It always looks like a texture added in Photoshop.
I hadn't read the second part.
Do you mean that it's just really like foggy almost? Or do you mean that you can't see the raindrops very clearly? My first tip to you would be to shoot at a very small aperture because that will allow the camera to capture more of the individual raindrops.
In focus.
Yeah, we'll have them in focus. And so then it will look more like rain actually falling than just fogginess.
Right, because out of focus drops are going to just be soft bits.
Additionally, you might want to also give the viewer some perspective, or not perspective,
context?
But context, exactly. So making sure that there are puddles or umbrella, or, you know, all of these are probably pretty cheesy, but something that tells the viewer, okay, yes, it's raining. But I would try the aperture first. And make sure your shutter speed also is high enough that you get them either in streaks, or I guess fast, it's slow enough that you catch the streaks if that's what you are trying to accomplish. If you're trying to just accomplish the raindrops themselves, then you want a really fast aperture. So kind of play around with your shutter speed. I'm confusing you and myself now. So yes, play with your shutter speed. And you will see the length of the streaks change the more you slow down your shutter speed and the more you make it fast. And you will see more raindrops the smaller your aperture is. So play around with that.
That's tricky though, because you need a lot of light to have both a small aperture and a fast shutter speed.
That's very true. So you're
on a cloudy day.
Right. So you're going to have to sacrifice some things.
ISO.
And you're going to have to use your ISO. So, and remember, a little noise is not terrible as long as your photo is properly exposed.
Yeah. Practically, lens hood is fantastic to keep the drops off your lens but allow you to keep shooting. So I have a list of recommended lens hoods. If it's really raining, you do want your camera to be weather resistant or water resistant. I get a lot of questions about how much that means often. And to me, a weather resistant or water resistant camera means that it can get rained on in use and be okay. If it's not weather resistant, like the entry-level T6i, it's okay if it's sprinkling or if it's misting for mist and dampness to be on it. Your mileage may vary. I have to put a little disclaimer, but I've had plenty of non-weather resistant cameras out in situations like that, and they've been absolutely fine. Also, if you are worried to have a non-weather resistant camera, or even if you do have one and you want to be a little bit more careful or it's raining harder, they make like $6 rain sleeves that you can put your camera in, room for your hands to come in, room for the lens to stick out. They're a little bit awkward. They're basically a glorified plastic bag with spots for your hands and spots for the lens, but that's something to consider. In a pinch, your shower cap from the hotel room works wonders because it's got that little bit of elastic that it can kind of stick over top of the main part of your camera, and you should be fine. Yep.
Just use common sense, and you know, worst comes to worst, maybe you suggest this while I zoned out trying to look at other questions, but just have somebody holding an umbrella over you is also really helpful.
That's true if you've got a buddy.
So here is one question. I would like to, oh no, that's not the one. Okay. And this is from Samyak Jane, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right. For bird photography.
Oh, right, this one.
When should one stop down the aperture? Many times I observe that only half the bird is in focus and sometimes the whole bird is in focus. And which camera is the ideal upgrade from the Canon 600D for wildlife and bird photography? The 70D or the 7D Mark II if it finally comes out? So I'll address the first part of the question, and then you're probably better off addressing the second part of the question. So the aperture that you set when photographing birds is going to vary widely based on the amount of light that you're working with. So if it's a really sunny day, or if you're shooting in a zoo and the bird's inside, or it's covered in shade. So you're gonna kind of have to watch your meter and adjust your aperture and shutter speed accordingly to get a proper exposure. The zoom that you're working with, so the focal length that you're working with, is also going to affect what aperture you should set your camera at or your lens at to get the bird either in more focus or in less focus. So depth of field is affected by two different things. One, your aperture, and two, your focal length. Oh, three things, and how far away from your subject you are. So longer lenses, something like the 70 to 200 from Canon or Nikon, at 200 millimeters, you're gonna have a very shallow depth of field based on the distance that you are from your subject, and then based on the distance that your subject is from the background. So for example, if you're shooting on a fairly bright day, and say your shutter speed is 1/400th of a second, your aperture and your ISO is, you're trying to properly expose the photo, so you've set your ISO accordingly. Your aperture will probably you'll probably want to set your aperture to something like 5.6 or 8, f8, to get the whole bird in focus. You will still have a lot of compression, and the background will be soft and out of focus if you're at 200 millimeters. But you will be able to get the whole bird in focus. If you are shooting at like f2.8 or you are shooting at 3.2, you might get half of the bird in focus instead. So again, it's one of those things where you kind of have to go there and practice and see how the gear that you have, how it performs under what circumstances. But generally at long focal lengths, you want to stop down, close your apertures, and to get a greater depth of field. If you're shooting wider, then that's a different story. If you're closer to your subject and you're shooting at a wider aperture or focal length, I mean, then you can probably get away with shooting at like f4 and then still have the whole bird in focus. It really just depends on where you are and what lens you're working with. Hopefully that answers your question.
If it doesn't, that was a long answer. That was
a really long
third answer. It just makes me want to go play duck hunt. Couple things to add. One, I think you should err on the side of stopping down a little bit, especially if we're talking about birds in flight, because it's going to be better to, if you have enough light, to shoot at that aperture that's going to make sure you get the whole bird in focus.
Well, and if it's a bird in flight, then my general assumption about that situation is that the bird's going to be pretty far away. So say you're shooting at like 200 millimeters, your depth of field is going to be pretty big.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be so far away.
No matter what aperture you're at.
Right, pretty much. Yeah. Okay. So you could shoot at f2.8 and the whole bird will be in focus. I think what they mean is like close-up shots of birds, you know, that you see are like standing on a branch and you're trying to soften the background. This is well, first off, you can go online to calculators and say, okay, I know that branch is, this might seem a little silly, you're not going to do this while there's a bird there, but you're going to start to learn these things like, if I'm shooting 15 feet away at 200 millimeters, I know that my depth of field is about, you know, it's a couple inches at 15 feet or something like that. It's not much. Crop sensor or full frame sensor. So, yeah. We answered that enough. The second part, 70D, 600D, 70D, 70D. All right, you want something that can fire off a burst of frames and is fairly quick to focus. Right now, the 70D is the champ on the Canon side in normal people's budgets. The 1DX would be the next camera to go to. If the 7D Mark II comes out in Photokina, and it really sounds like it's going to, that is being described as a baby 1DX. So a crop sensor version, and that is likely to have very serious focusing chops, meaning very good, and fast frame rate as well. So that will probably be the camera that a lot of serious wildlife photographers upgrade to if they're not already shooting on full frame. But that crop's nice because it kind of feels like you get a little bit more zoom because of that crop multiplication factor. Totally.
It's really just field of view, not so much zoom, but we don't want to go down that road. So yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that was a lot of questions for that. And do we have another one? Or did we answer... oh, Crystal. She's a natural light photographer. She's interested in trying out off-camera flashes. Oh, I think we answered this. Will you be putting out tutorials? I'll keep reading it anyway. I don't remember. On using flash.
I don't think we did.
Maybe in different situations for using them. How, like for weddings and portraits for fill light. We were just talking about this yesterday. In the car yesterday. We would love to start, you know, producing a series of videos like this. And we hope to soon.
Yeah.
Yes. Right now we don't have anything.
If you have specific questions though and you want to write them for us to answer on the next podcast, and feel free, we can do the best to answer them. But not give, maybe, you know, like show you visually.
The quick answer for most of the time for wedding work, our flashes are on our cameras when we're using flash, and they are backwards in 45 degrees bouncing off of whatever near surface that will fill the room with light.
Yep.
And it makes a huge difference for your indoor photography pictures, folks. Primes are nice. I love primes. I've got that 5-reason prime video, but for indoor photography, having an external an external flash that you can bounce.
And the problem with
huge difference.
Yeah, and the problem with primes is that you can't really control the direction of the light most of the time. So if you have a flash on your camera, you can control the direction of the light. That being said, it does not look like natural lighting photography, so you know, it's kind of a give and take sort of thing. I
also don't remember if I answered David Lee Gilbert's looking for a super zoom camera that can shoot in RAW. Panasonic FZ1000. The RX10 also, those are both options. I think the FZ1000 is a little bit better at a price point, but overall it's good. I think that wraps up the questions.
Yeah.
And this podcast.
That's right. Stay tuned for our Flickr Pic of the week. And if you haven't already subscribed, you know, he's going to be releasing lots of really great videos, more reviews. The Olympus reviews are coming up. And another think before you click, really, really short videos that can help you take your photography to the next level.
Yep. And assignments, more assignments coming up. We had great participation in the Diptych. Love to see even more in the future assignments. I think everybody who participated in that really enjoyed it. At least they said they did, and I don't see why they'd lie to me.
But you've got to subscribe and visit the Facebook page and subscribe to the newsletter to stay in the loop about everything that's going on. So go ahead and do that. Follow us on Instagram too if you want. I post pictures of my cats.
Isn't that tempting? Isn't that tempting? I love Angela's.
Sold them on the idea.
Angela participated in the Diptych assignment, and she was very excited that you liked her image. Would you say you loved it?
I did.
Oh, she loved your image,
I loved
Angela.
her image.
Angela said, well, see, all this spoils the rest of it, because Angela said, well, my next goal is to get Christina to love one of my images, and she's got an idea for a basket full of kittens with a baby near window light.
It's a pretty good idea.
It's.
I already love it, and I haven't even seen it yet.
She can picture it. She can picture it. Yes, we love for you to follow us in all of our various places. It's wonderful, and it's also more places for you to reach us, or mostly me. Christina doesn't answer your questions. She just passes them to me.
Really?
Have you answered anybody's questions? You've commented a couple times.
I mean, I don't. Yeah.
You're busy. You got work.
Anyway,
got work too.
made me seem like I'm so
dragged
rude.
out the ending long enough. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, don't.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Photo Mishmash. I'm Christina.
And I'm Toby.
And this is episode 28.
DSLR. Damn it.
Ah, I did so good, too. Welcome back, everybody, to another Photo Mishmash. I'm Christina.
And
oh, what is wrong with you?
I don't know. It was funny because I still wasn't done laughing.